Here's my basic guide to Fracture. So with Fracture is one of those maps that have a lot of differences to other maps, and I think that's one of the main pain points for Fracture. So the main difference with Fracture is that the T-spawn is split, and this creates a natural flank for the attackers. And this basically has a knock-on effect to the defenders, meaning that the defenders kind of have to swap roles with the attackers slightly, where they have to go and take space, because if they just stay in their positions, they will get naturally pincered and flanked, and they'll probably end up losing the site very, very quickly. Okay, so first we'll talk about defense and what they kind of have to do to make things more even in the game. So the first thing is that they're going to be more aggressive. And the way that they do this is they usually will be thinking about where they take the first fight and what are the important places on the map. This is something that you actually should be doing on other maps anyway. So for instance, if we take like Cypher, for instance, I've got highlighted down here, they're going to want to take their first fights within their setup, usually, because they can use their util to catch people off guard while they're like scanned by his trip and that kind of stuff, right? He really likes to get kills when they're in his setup. If you think about like Jett as well, Jett likes to take fights on off angles because she has a dash. So she likes to take fights in slightly outwards away from the barrier in more neutral space, so then she can dash into safer space. That's what she likes to do. That's how she's going to take fights. That's where she wants the first fight to occur for her. On Fracture, it's a lot more bound to the map, even though agents obviously are very, very important to how you're going to take your first fight. But for instance, Cypher, he's going to struggle playing very defensively on this map, right? Because even though he does have tools to help him play defensively, he's still going to get pincered from both sides. And it's hard to deal with that, even as an agent like Cypher. So generally, it's going to be better to move out the site. And so the main thing we want to be thinking about is what are the areas we can take. And these are the 4 areas that you can take on Fracture. Arcade and bench, dish, dish and, oh no, it's just dish and drop, I guess. Sand and main, and then B main. These 4 areas are going to be the main areas that you want to be thinking about taking. Generally, these two, like bench and arcade, and sand and A main, are the best 2 areas for you to take on defense. The reason for that is because they have double choke points into the site, or at least around the site, right? You have door and A main, and you have tower and whatever this is called, out of arcade, I guess. These are the 2 areas that are going to be a bit more, a bit better for defense, because they're going to have more angles back into the post plant, rather than, also you don't give them multiple angles for taking the site as well. And it's going to be easier for you to retake on the post plant. So it's much easier for you to take these areas, or at least it's much better for you to take these areas. Not exactly easier, because for the most part, attackers are also going to be wanting to put their strong side, their 3 players, or at least 3 players, into this area as well, along with this area too. So, and these 2 are going to be the more weak sides usually, but they can, at least more so B main, might have a bit more players sometimes, but Dish very rarely has any more than 2 players. Sometimes I will have 3, but for the most part, it's going to be 2. So most of the time, it's better to try and take one of these areas. Okay, so this is like an example of defense on Fracture, where we have a strong side of 3 over here, attacking into A main, and trying to hold A main. This is what they want to do, right? They want to try and get kills with their util. This is just like random, like you can do stuff like this if you want to. It can be really nice, but make sure that you're actually getting kills with this util. It's really, really important. You don't want to just use your util to delay them. I've had someone like, I had a Teo on my team the other day, and he was just placing his stuff like this at the very start of the round. The enemy team would just see it, and they would just run away. You want to make sure you're combining util in a way where they can't get out of any lethal util you might have, such as a raise nade. You want to make sure you're getting kills with this stuff. And if you don't have a raise nade, for instance, you'd have a Jett instead, then don't use your util like this. Instead, use it when they're closer, and the Jett can follow up, or the Tail can follow up and trade and get kills with their guns, right? Like do something like this or something, you know? Something that can work like this. Okay, so we talked about the strong side, and now we talk about the weak side. So the weak side is going to be weaker. So the weak side, much like something like Bind, you're only going to be taking 1 lane. So in Bind, you might be taking just hookah, or you might be taking just long as the weak side, but you won't be taking both. You won't be trying to contest both, because it's going to be very difficult. You're going to have your utility spread thin. So here we've got Chamber and Brim, who are going to be trying to like hold arcade, right? They're going to use a smoke. They might commit maybe a molly, but probably not usually. But they want to try and just hold this area. They're committing manpower here so they can trade and get kills on anyone trying to lurk through. They probably wouldn't actually be playing this defensively if they had that smoke up. It might be something like this instead or something. Or maybe, yeah, like this or something. They'll be trying to hold the smoke, making sure that people can't just like walk through and do random things. This smoke is actually really good because it also means that it could threaten the people bench here. they don't know what's going on behind the smoke, so it means that you could like walk through and make some crazy plays that way. This is a smoke that sets up for those kinds of plays. If you do this one, it's going to be a lot worse because you're giving them a lot more space, right? This one, yes, you do have to worry about someone walking through here, but you don't have, but they also have to walk about you walking through like this too. So it's going to create problems for them not knowing what you're doing. So, and that's what you want to do on weak side. You want to make yourself look big and threatening on this side, because then it makes it so like you're basically pushing the enemy team into your strong side if you look strong on weak side, if that makes sense, right? And that's what you kind of want to do. You can see on this side as well, not contesting this at all, we just have a trap. You can also flip this as well. You can have the setup on this side like this and have the trip over here. That is also, I think this is actually maybe a bit more common in solo queue to have it like this. I personally think arcade is better to go take than B main is. But yeah, you can see this as well. It does work on weak side. Bear in mind though, if you do give away a fight like this and don't use a smoke, so you would usually have a smoke here, but if they start fighting through it and there's a lot of people, they'll see Chamber if Chamber doesn't die, or well, yeah, they'll see him if he dies as well. But what I mean is like if he commits to a fight and gets away, usually they'll know that it's going to be 2 players on the site, right? If he dies, there's going to be 1 player on the site because they'll know that he's probably going to play weak side because it's Chamber, right? So you want to be careful of that, giving away the information too early. And the reason why I say this on this side and not on this side is because very rarely do people they usually respect this smoke and will wait this smoke out, or they'll use more util to get through it. On this side, they use like a flash or a stun, and they'll send like multiple players through. So they disrespect this a lot more, so they'll get the info faster on you here. So you want to be careful doing it on B main, because I think it's just, and for that reason, I think it's a tiny bit worse. And it might just be more of a solo queue thing, to be honest, and that this happens, because I think that arcade overall is the better place for you to send manpower anyway on attack. So it's quite weird that that happens on solo queue in my experience anyway. But yeah, that's how I'll defend on weak side as well. Generally as well, you want to try and be a bit more non-committal on this side of the map as well, or on your weak side, because you can retake as well on this map, especially if your strong side has done a good job. So if your strong side's over here, then they've done a good job. It means that you might be able to, especially if you're playing the same side, it means that you're going to be able to have this flank for free because your teammates have this side, right? If you're opposite side, it can be a bit more difficult, but the flanks will most likely get this will actually most likely be a flank. And then if you can get out this side, so say if your weak side is playing up here, it basically means that your weak side will be playing like you essentially pincer them, right? You'll have a flank coming this way. You'll have maybe someone coming from CT like the breach. And then you've got your 2 players from weak side going in this side too. Obviously, that's like ideal scenario that no one's died. And very unlikely that actually happens. But that's kind of like what it might lead up to in the sequence of play. Okay, so now we're talking about defense. I want to talk about attack. And attack, I think, is a bit more simple. Where you're basically just going to be trying to make sure you don't get pushed away. And if you do get pushed away, identify where their strong side are, and then just go attack their weak side. That's usually how it goes. You can also try and find some sneaky like flanks. There's plenty of places. There's literally 4 entries into the site, into every site, that are complete opposite to each other. So it's very easy to try and find the weak point of their like sentinel setup, or where they don't have anyone watching the flank and that kind of stuff. It should be quite nice if you are lurking on this site, so on this map. It can actually be quite good to lurk a lot and to try and find these openings. I think one of the most common openings I really like is B main. B main very rarely has any like sentinel util on it, and you're very likely to get some really nice flanks. Same with B arcade. I think overall B is a lot more open. I think the part that makes A more awkward is the drop, and also the extremity is sand to sand. It has a door, so you're making noise 2 areas on this site. Where on B you're not making any noise at all really, because you can walk up the rope as well. So honestly, this is a great map for lurking. And so I'll quickly also talk about weak side, strong side, that kind of stuff, where you generally want to have the bulk of your force towards one of the more open areas. So either arcade bench or A main, because this area is probably close to being fine, because this is kind of fine. This choke point is. But you want to make sure that you generally have 2 players over here, no one lurking, generally, because arcade's quite hard to take if there's anyone actually contesting it. So you do want to have 3 players, 2 players there. And if you do have 3 players here, I would have 2 players here. That way you're like full committing to B. Not always the case, but yeah, it is ideally quite helpful to do that. And the other thing as well, if you have 3 players here, You can actually afford one player here because drop is just very awkward to get out of, and very rarely do they have many players contesting it. They might just have one person contesting it, sometimes peaking early. You can send 2 players to go punish, and then one player of those can go lurk. But that generally is what I like to see on drop. So yeah, on attack, the general premise is you want to try and find where the attack, like the strong side is, and you want to try and move away from it if possible, and then go attack the weak side. Or you want to try and find a lot of nice lurks and a lot of nice picks early. You can play slow on this map. Don't rush. A lot of people rush on this map. Yes, it's kind of fine if you know they're playing sites. If you know they're playing the map wrong, rushes can be good because they won't have anyone to help them and they'll be pincered very quickly if you are actually rushing correctly with multiple angles. If you're sending 5 to one side, why can't I undo? If you're sending 5 to one side, that's going to be really bad for you because once again, if they have anyone in drop or anyone like in one of the other extremities, like the other extremity of the map, right? So say if you're sending 5 to arcade, if they have anyone over here, then, or maybe 5 to B main, and then you have one person here, it's going to be bad for you because once again, you're putting yourself in the position where you see like this L shape for the attackers, sorry, for the defenders, where they can attack you from anywhere in this L shape, and you have a lot more of a worse area to defend from, right? So, and you only have the side. So that's something to bear in mind with attack, is that you generally want to be splitting up opposite sides of the map as much as possible. Lurking is very strong, and ideally you can kind of play slow to identify the strong side and then try and play around that in some way. You don't have to necessarily play away from it. You don't have to run away from it every time. You can sometimes still, especially depending on what their util they've used. If they've used all their util and it's got nothing done for them, that's a good time to actually attack the strong side, because if you attack the strong side at that point, you're going to kill 3 players instead of 2. With your utility, and then it's going to be a lot harder for them to retake in like what, 2v4, 2v5, 2v3. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, and if I didn't explain something very well, then please ask me questions in the comments below. Yeah, so that's it for the basics of Fracture. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in my next one.